going through those tonight. I just wanted to remind you that we're starting with Statement 2, pardon me, which is what the board officially approves as a budget. It is a combined statement of all of our different funds. So in that is our operating fund, our special purpose funds, and our capital funds. That is what the bylaw will be for, and I will go through those slides to show you all those. It shows it by major function and major resources and by function. I will go through the operating fund in more detail, as that's the fund that is used on a day-by-day by the district to fund the operation of the district. It also shows the surplus and deficits by fund as we go through. This is the overall budget that we will be looking at tonight. You can see that the revenue is at $244 million, which is up over the $222 million that was in our preliminary budget in the spring. The main drivers of that are some land acquisition funding and the update on the classroom enhancement fund, or the restored language for the teachers. The funding that we have had updates from the ministry on is what is the big drivers of that. You also see those reflected in the expenses. As a total of all the funds, there will be a surplus for the year of $8.9 million. That is all in the capital funds, just because of the way we have to report the incoming funds and the outgoing expenditures. And then there is also in there a deficit for the operating fund, which I will go into more detail on. This schedule shows you the breakdown by category of what our revenue is and by the major categories. And I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I wanted to show you that the bulk of the $244 million is in our operating fund, $196 million of that, with $30 million in our special purpose and just under $17 million in our capital funds. This is the expense by function by the different funds, and once again, as you can see, the bulk of our funds are in the operating at just under $198 million and just over $30.5 million for special purpose, with capital being at 10.3. You can see that the bulk of our costs on the three funds is in the instruction category at $196 million. This is the bylaw that you will be before you tonight to approve, with a total expenditure budget of $242,731,575. Schedule 1 shows the surpluses by fund, and you can see that as a district we have an accumulated surplus of $104 million. The bulk of that being in the capital fund, which is $91.3 million of that. That is just due to the accounting rules that we have to follow. That's mainly the funding that we receive from the ministry for land, which doesn't get depreciated over time, so that surplus just sits there. The operating fund has accumulated surplus of just over $13.5 million. You'll notice that the net revenue over expenses is a deficit of $1.1 million, with another $2.2 million from local capital, for a deficit of $3.3 million, and I'll get into more of that in a moment. This shows us our surplus position. The top portion is what was in our financial statements that were approved by the board in September of this year. We have at the top our internally board restricted surplus of $3.188 million. That is governed by board policy. We restricted $899,000 for the spring budget for us to balance that budget, because it was in a deficit position. And just wanted to point out, when I'm saying a deficit position, the district has a surplus, and we have been working with a systematic approach to slowly draw down those surpluses, so that $899,000 deficit was a planned deficit by the board. That time we also restricted $1.8 million for infrastructure, $500,000 for student capacity needs, and there was a grant mid to late last year that was a one-time fund from the ministry that was for a student learning grant. That was just over $1 million that was meant to alleviate costs for parents and was to be spent at the remainder of last school year, and what wasn't spent had to be restricted and spent in this school year. The $946,675 is what was left of those funds at the end of the school year last year, and there's a plan for that to be spent for this upcoming year. We had $900,000 in initiatives to support technology, $750,000 to support schools, and then $475,000 in school surpluses from the prior year, and $2.4 million in school-generated funds. That left us with internally restricted funds of $11.9 million and unrestricted surplus of just under $5 million, for a total restricted surplus at the end of the year of $16.9 million. As mentioned in the previous slide, the operating fund is in a deficit right now of $3.3 million, which we will talk about tonight, and we will need to unrestrict some of these surpluses, as those $3.3 million is made up of one-time items to slowly draw down our accumulated surplus. Here's the breakdown of what that $3.3 million makes up. The first is the $899,000, which was internally restricted when we did the spring budget to balance off that budget as a planned drawdown. We have $500,000 for student capacity needs, which was for portables. We have $200,000 for infrastructure replacement. That was an initiative we undertook with 3 of our elementary schools with some furniture redesign as a kind of a pilot for a couple of our schools. The student learning grant of $946,000, which I mentioned earlier, we have now put that into our budget, and we're unrestricting this to pay for those funds. And a district initiative to support schools for $300,000. It's made up of 2 things: a central fund that we've created for teachers to apply for a classroom furniture project as we start to refresh the furniture in the district. That was $250,000, and another $50,000 we've added to our initiatives for schools fund. In the spring budget, we had $150,000 set up for that. That fund has now been increased to $200,000 in this budget. And then the last item is the school surpluses, funds that weren't spent last year that they are allowed to carry over to this year to be able to spend. So that's what makes up the $3.3 million deficit. Sounds like a large number, but all those things are one-time items that were planned in the restrictions of the accumulated surplus in the prior calendar year. So the board tonight needs to approve appropriating these restricted surpluses to balance our fall budget. And as I mentioned previously, these are the internally restricted surpluses that will then be unrestricted, and we'll need a motion for that. They are the same as the ones that were on the previous slide that I just went through. Based on those being unrestricted, it would leave the following items as restricted when we complete this school year. We would still have our $3.2 million for the internally restricted by the board policy. We would have $1.6 million left in infrastructure replacement, $900,000 to support technology, and $450,000 to support schools initiatives, as well as the school-generated bank accounts of $2.4 million, leaving us with just under $8.6 million that would be restricted, and the same $4.9 million unrestricted, for a total of $13.573 million still in restricted surpluses at the end of the school year. The schedules 2, 2A, 2B, and 2C are what make up our operating fund. This is where the bulk of our time will be spent tonight going through. These are the funds that we use as our operating funds for the district. The Schedule 2 shows the operating revenue expenses. 2A is the revenue by source, and 2B is expense by source. 2C shows the expenses by function, program, and object. Here is the operating revenue expenses for our amended budget. The revenues are now at $196.655 million, which is up just under $4.2 million, and there will be more information on the breakdown on that. You can see our expenses are now at $197.772 million, up $4.55 million. You will then also see the same appropriation of $3.3 million to fund the shortfall in the budget between those two revenue and expense numbers. A little more detail on the revenue. The ministry operating grants, which we've provided updates in November on the enrollment changes. We now have 2.9 more in funding from the ministry. Tuition has increased by $900,000, and other revenue has gone up by $293,000. Here's the detail on the operating grant. You can see that our enrollment is up. We were up about 151 FTE based on projections when we did the spring. Our identified numbers have gone up, so we have higher funding for our identified students. You'll see the decline of $565,000. That pertains to the average teacher cost calculation funding that is done by the ministry. Due to the retirements, we have a lower average teacher cost than the district, or so the provincial averages, and that came with a reduced funding for this year. We've seen a similar trend over the last number of years as we've had more and more retirements. And also, as we're a growing district, we keep hiring, which are usually younger teachers at a lower cost. You'll also notice the funding for graduated adults has increased by $214,000. That's because the ministry has announced that they are going back to funding the graduated adults program. You'll see that there's a reduction in our other revenue. This is a reversal of what had happened a couple of years back when they had originally been funding it that way, and we then had to charge fees for students to do that, but that has changed for this fall. Tuition revenue, the largest change there is in our ISP program. In our preliminary budget, we had 940 FTE in the plan. We have now hit 1,025 ISP students, a growth of 85 FTE for this year. And the biggest drop there is then the graduated adults tuition has dropped, and you saw the increase on the other side. The reason that those two don't match up perfectly is the way that they fund the graduated adults now for the ministry. It's more of a phased approach, so there's a timing lag between the time we receive the funds, whereas last year we received the funds from the students up front when they took the course. Our other revenue details, not a lot of changes there. The big changes due to salary recoveries. Those are things for when people are off on workers' comp that are reimbursed by workers' comp or by secondments or those kind of things. The support staff benefits, when the QP went to the provincial plan, we built that into our original budget, unaware that that would be funded by the ministry, so they have funded those increased costs for those benefit plans, so that $299,000 reflects that funding from the ministry that we didn't plan in our operating costs. In the spring budget, we just had the increased expenditures. Schedule 2B, the expenses by source. This is by category. You can see where the major changes are. I have more detailed slides on all of these. There is the teachers have declined. Principals and education assistants are up, and then the other professionals and substitutes have increased as well. The only one that I haven't got a backup slide for is the employee benefits. They've increased by $321,000. That's just due to the overall higher staffing levels for the district. Start with the teachers. They declined, but that's mainly due to, once again, the average teacher cost change that we've seen. So we took a reduction in our average teacher costs of $850,000. The district has added 3 elementary divisions. They added $340,000 of teachers in secondary. Instructional services, that is a net number of some staffing positions that were previously funded under the priority measures funding, offset by the fact that we didn't fill all of our instructional service positions until later in the year because we filled the school positions first, and there's a couple that we didn't even hire in the end. So that's a net number of increases of positions, but offset by vacancies and late starts. In the spring budget, we had a contingency for 4 divisions, which we've now removed out, and now that we know the number of our divisions. And then the next 2 are ELL, learning support teachers. Those are other positions that were also in the priority measures funding prior to this that we've absorbed in the operating budget, but have also been offset slightly by vacancies on unfilled positions in those areas as well. And then you can see a very large number of $614,000 for vacancies and late starts within our schools that had happened in the start of this year, with a large number of new positions that were put out and hired. That gets you to the decline in the $819,000. Changes in principals and VPs, the first being the salaries raises for both of them of $150,000. We added some VP positions at 2 elementary schools and topped up a VP position at a 3rd for a partial. We've added a district VP for special education and a district VP for childcare. On the educational assistance side, we've added 19 SEA positions to our schools for just over $707,000. We've also put out a bunch of central positions that have started later in the year. There's another 25 of those, I believe, that we're working to fill. And I don't believe all of them are filled yet, but we are still actively working to do that. So with all the late starts of those, that have worked out to be about $351,000. In the spring, we had also had a contingency for adding more SEAs into the system, which is $385,000, which we have removed now that we've added the positions. We also see late starts and vacancies for SEA positions for about $364,000. The Aboriginal support workers, we've added a couple positions there as the Aboriginal funding went up, so that's a targeted fund by the ministry that needs to be spent, so the Aboriginal department has added a few positions to that as well. And we added 2 work experience program support staff for career education. And then there's some minor other changes of $27,000. Changes in the support staff. We've also had some late starts for some of our clerical positions. That was about $48,000. QP overtime has increased by $22,600. We had a number of positions that we haven't been able to fill at the board office or that were vacant for periods of the time for this year, which equaled $85,000. We added a mechanic that we're working to hire still. We've finally got a couple applications for that, so hopefully to have that one hired shortly. So that's $19,000. Schools added a couple noon supervisors. And in the spring budget, we had a fund set up for school initiatives, about $150,000. $75,000 of that we had planned for labor that we had hoped would go through schools. We have changed our approach to that, trying to get more work done. So we're in the process of trying to hire 6 additional facility positions to do those kind of school requests. So that $49,000 is the net change between the $150,000 and the cost for those positions for the remainder of the year. And there is surplus money ongoing for that cost for next year as well, so that we can hopefully get caught up on some of those changes in our buildings that schools are looking to happen. So that explains the $31,000 in change in the support staff. Changes in other professionals, the exempt increases were just under $30,000. We've added a IT position for infrastructure and security. We've also added a new manager in the maintenance area to work on implementing a new work order system and to work with transportation and health and safety concerns. So that position started in the new year. And then we had in the preliminary budget positions that weren't filled, that when we went out to market to hire them, the requirements for the salaries were higher than the level that were in the budget originally. And that is for the $151,000. Our substitute costs have gone up by $836,000. You can see that the bulk of that is due to vacancies. You can see the TTOC vacancies is up by $524,000. You can see the casual replacements for QP under the schools, the central and the central SEAs are up by $271,000, $41,000, and $70,000 respectively, which is the bulk of the changes, and that's just reflective of the fact of so many vacancies and late starts that we've had to fill people with TTOCs and EDOCs as we've gone through the process. Service and supplies, here's the breakdown of those increases. When we had all these late starts, we didn't necessarily take back all the funding that we provided to all of our schools. So you'll see that our supply categories have increased a fair bit, knowing that this is one-time money for the process of hiring all these staff. We wanted to leave that bulk of those funds with schools to be able to spend it, but they are to be spent on one-time items. So they were spent on supplies items so that we know that we have an ongoing cost structure that we can maintain. So the supplies and services are up $3.1 million. Biggest one, or being one of the larger ones, sorry, is the increase in services. We've bought projectors for schools. Schools have budgeted $96,000 for innovation projects within their own school budgets. That's in addition to funds that the district has set aside for innovation work. The medical fees, there was a slight change in the premium structure that we have to pay for the medical coverage for the ISP students, so that's an increase from what we understood when we did the budget in the spring. Yorkson Creek parking lot, part of the deal that we made with the township when we used the parking space at Yorkson, which they also use for their park sites as we do a joint site, was that we would contribute to them redoing the parking on their park site, so staff are parking there as well as the township for the field. So that $250,000 was our contribution to do that, so that we could put portables on the parking, and that was part of the permitting requirements when we went with township. The district has undergone a risk assessment by KPMG, which we are in process with, so that's $33,000. Legal fees up $18,000. Repair contracts, mainly with facilities and IT, has increased by just under $49,000. And then we bought handsets and earphones and things like that for the new phone system that we're implementing, which is Skype for Business. And then $29,000 in other items to become up to the $791,801. Increases in Protein travel. There's conferences that have increased with ISP as well as with instructional services. We've added $40,000 for Central Pro-D. Schools have put in another $12,000 for Pro-D in their school budgets. ISP travel budget was increased by $36,000, and school mileage and travel went up by $9,200. The dues and fees is mainly due to the increase in commissions for our ISP students. As the enrollment numbers have gone up, so do the commission amounts. We estimated that to be just under $95,000 for the additional students. Increase in supplies. Here you can see schools have put $155,000 in computer hardware into their school budgets. Some mechanical trade supplies have gone up by $10,000. The new work order system for maintenance is a one-time cost of implementing for just under $63,000. Schools, as you mentioned earlier, with the additional funds, have also put some funds aside for smaller furniture purchases within their schools of $121,000. The Aboriginal supplies has gone up by $41,000. That's the funding that is targeted by the ministry that needs to be spent on Aboriginal programs. The $50,000 to increase the Central Innovation Grants, which is part of that restricted surplus that will be unrestricted if the board so approves it tonight. And the general school supply accounts have gone up by $591,000. You also see here the $946,000, which is that one-time funding that we received for the Student Learning Grant. That was a restricted surplus that will also be unrestricted this evening as well. And then central supplies to schools, the plan for that is mainly resources for the new curriculum that we've added into the amended budget for a total of $2,050,000. Schedule 3. PSAB requires that we need to record our special purpose funds separately and be part of the financial statements. They need to now be budgeted. That wasn't always the case with some of these special purpose funds. The slide here it shows the total revenue expenses of those special purpose funds. You can see that our ministry revenue has increased by $7 million. That's mainly the increase in that classroom enhancement fund for the restored teacher language. The $642,000 in other revenues, that's school-generated funds that as we enroll more and more students, those funds that schools collect from the students for things like yearbooks and those kind of things increases as well. You can see the increase is mostly in the instruction side, which is the teacher cost for the restored language and the CEF funding. Here's a list of the revenue of all of our special purpose funds and what they look like. As mentioned, a lot of them don't change as they're set funds by the ministry. The biggest being the Classroom Enhancement Fund and the priority measures funds that we had estimated when we did the budget for the spring. So the priority measures has increased to $207,000. Those funds the ministry has targeted and needs to be used to fund the restored language. So when we look at the actual costs for the restored language in the special purpose fund, it is the combination of the priority measures 797 and the $18.175 million that we will have to be spending on the classroom restored language. Schedule 4 is where we talk about our capital plan, local and bylaw capital. Sorry, Woody, it's stuck. Thank you. Provide a list here of some of those, of what is in the local capital in our updated budget. The board had approved to save the small gym when we did the right sizing of LSS as a cost that the district would bear. That came in at just over $913,000. We've set aside several different funds to do some furniture work within our district, which all has basically been in those restricted surplus amounts. The Walnut Grove track is $520,000. That was a joint project by us, the township, and some private donors. Our portion of that $520,000 is just under $180,000. The rest was supported by the township and private donorship. Computer hardware of $151,000. We upgraded the boilers through some ministry funding, but had to contribute to some of that. Our contribution was $113,000. And then the largest portion is portables due to the the expanding district and the needs within the district. So last year we installed or bought about 20 portables that we had received by the end of the calendar year. That was paid for partially by the restored language. There was 9 of those that were paid by a special fund from the ministry, 11 of them that were paid for by the district. Those were all paid for, but not all the install costs were done in that year. Some of that was done through the summer, so that is partially that. We've ordered another 3 portables that are have just arrived and are being installed this week, last week, this week, and next week. So those costs are in there, and we've also ordered 4 portables that we hope to receive by the end of the year. The locations for them to be determined, but it was felt that we would need at least 4 of those and wanted to get an order in so that we would be certain to receive some by the end of the calendar, or end of the school year. And once we have more definitive answers on the grids, we'll know if we need more of than those 4. The odds of getting them before June are not very good, so we wanted to order some so that we knew that we had some. So you can see the portable cost is a large portion of our capital at just under $1.2 million. Some work on buying some maintenance vehicles as we continue to work on the equipment for our maintenance staff to make sure that they have equipment that is functioning and operating. And then we have about $179,000 of a bunch of smaller capital items for things that are for the board office maintenance and a few things for the schools to bring us to the $4.1 million. Once again, this is our budget bylaw that needs to be approved tonight for the $242,731,575. And then if you could hit the one last slide there, Woody, that would be great, and just pull all those up. So we'll hand it over to the chair to work through the approval of these unrestricted surpluses that are up on the screen, and then to go through the process for the bylaw for the budget. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
So, trustees, we'll begin with the appropriation of the funds. So get that moved to any questions, and then we'll move on to the amended budget and any questions or comments on that. So can we begin with a motion that the Board of Education approve staff to appropriate or unrestrict the following restricted surplus amounts: $500,000 internally restricted for student capacity needs, $300,000 district initiatives to support schools, $475,909 school surpluses, $200,000 internally restricted for infrastructure replacement, and $946,675 student learning grant. We have a mover for that, moved by Trustee Dyckman, seconded by Trustee Coburn. Any comments or questions on that item? So all those in favor? Any opposed? And so now we need a motion that the that School District 35 Langley amended annual budget bylaw for 2017-18 in the amount of $242,731,575 be given first reading. Moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee McVeigh. Any comments, questions on that, Trustee Ross?
Well, the numbers just keep going up. I'm always amazed every time we meet. I remember the very first one of these I did years ago. We just climbed over $100 million, and now 244. It's just amazing. I mean, that's $250 million. But the question I have for you is, what keeps you awake at night? When I look at these big numbers, I look at the different grants we get. You know, the government can take them away, the ministry can take them away from us, just like that. And we can't own this. So what are the ones that you see that you're concerned about?
I think the classroom restored language funding, we understand what it is for this year. We don't know what that process looks like for the school year next year. So that is one that does concern me. We haven't had a lot of clear direction on that. We're hoping to get that because we finish this one, we start on the budget for the next school year immediately after. So that is one that concerns me. The MSP announcement. a little while ago is a bit of a concern. For a while there, we'll be paying both, because for 6 months we pay the MSP premium plus the tax. And in our rough numbers, it looks like we are going to it's going to be a higher cost for us going forward with the tax than what we pay in MSP premiums. We're still sorting that out. I know our ASBO, BCSTA, BCSSA are all trying to get clarity as to what that means for education, but that's going to be something that we're going to have to look at.
And of course, there's the International Students Fund as well, which is $14 million, roughly $15 million for us. The opportunity for the government to see that and say, gee, I'd like to share that around is always a big concern as well. So I know you haven't heard anything on that as well, but I just thought it'd be important to mention that one as well. The first one you mentioned was the Classroom Enhancement Fund. Is that one you referred to? Okay. Which was for us was it $9 million? How much?
Just over $18 million.
Yeah, 18. Thank you.
Mr. Todd.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. So one of the questions I had was, and you don't necessarily delineate in the budget, but remedies. Does that come out of priority measures, or have we done a wrap around that yet? Or is that classroom enhancement?
The remedies is part of the classroom enhancement fund.
And do we have a ballpark figure on how much remedies?
Well, it changes on a month-by-month basis, but I think we're about $1.7 million right now. It's in that range.
Thank you.
Seeing no further speakers, that motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? And so can we get a motion now that the School District 35 Langley amended annual budget bylaw for 2017-18 in the amount of $242,731,575 be given second reading? Moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Dykeman. Any comments or questions on that? No? All those in favor? Any opposed? And now can we get the motion that the Board of Education of School District 35 Langley approve having all 3 readings of the amended annual budget bylaw for 2017-18 in the amount of $242,731,575 at tonight's meeting. Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Ross. Comments or questions on that? Trustee Ross?
I just wanted to let the public know why I asked that question, is that we have a number of surpluses that we've been talking about. And we say, well, how come you're not spending them? And I just wanted to the reason I think it's wise, I think the school district is being very prudent, is by holding some of it back, because we just do not know. There's some serious things that are possibly going to come out of it. And so it's just a very prudent thing for us to do. So I applaud to work with the finance department in presenting these numbers to us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Dykeman.
I just wanted to ask a question for those watching and who may not have attended the meeting. Why is it that when we do the amended budget that we end up doing all 3 readings as opposed to going back out, and why would that be?
It's been the past practice of this district to do all 3 readings. When we do the amended budget is a tweaking process based on enrollments and changes. Most of those costs are already being spent as we've gone through the year. They're more of a known. There's less room for input into them than what happens in the preliminary budget. So the preliminary budget is more the time where we go out to the public and to our partner groups and those kind of things, because that's when we're developing the structure of that budget for that year. Most of the costs are in a normal budget year. It is they're more fixed at this point.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, all those in favor? No opposed? So finally, that brings us to a motion that the School District 35 Langley amended annual budget bylaw for 2017-18 in the amount of $242,731,575 be given third reading, passed, and adopted on this 27th day of February 2018. Trustee McVeigh moves, Trustee Todd seconds. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much, and that brings us to the superintendent's report and the framework for enhanced student learning and quality learning. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Superintendent Mel Gill to introduce our staff that are here this evening. Very appropriate in terms of timing for this. This week we're looking at the role and part of inclusion and accepting school district, and we do a lot of work in terms of learning support services to make this happen. I think a number of programs, and also looking at our model in terms of always trying to find ways to work with our staff going forward. So, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. I'm pleased to introduce today District Principal Carmen Eberle and Director Lisa Zielinski here this evening. We're going to present their report on inclusion. We're going to focus. Their focus is always on quality instruction and increasing capacity for school teams. They work closely with our youth care workers, our FBAs, classrooms, and resource teachers. This evening, they're going to focus on 3 components of the framework, specifically every child belongs, respect for learning differences, and socially responsible citizens. I think personally I'd like to speak to the amazing support they provided to me, the schools that I work with, not just the admin team, but certainly the extended team that provides side-by-side mentoring in times where there's an urgent and emergent issue, and as well to stand side-by-side and mentor our resource staff, especially at a time when we have new resource teachers in the district. So I'm pleased to do Division 13.
Thank you.
Excited to be here on Respect and Diversity Week, so thank you for having us. All of a sudden, we were almost at the end. Thanks for having us. Okay, well, I started at the beginning. So what we're really excited to share is the continued journey of inclusion in Langley schools. And we say it as a journey because we have come a long way, and we have yet a long way to go. And so we want to celebrate the successes that we have had, because while we struggle through times, together, we also have lots of successes that we're excited to share and have people recognize that the work that's going on. So we do recognize that we're in it together, and we continue along our learning journey. So as Assistant Superintendent Gill mentioned, every child belongs, and this is our framework, and it's on our vision, and it's in all of our schools. And so we wanted to celebrate, where is that? This is Respect and Diversity Week, so it is an opportunity of us to strengthen and recognize that when we are diverse, we enhance each other. No team is solid if everybody has the same skills. We are enhanced by the differences that we bring and complement each other around that. And I certainly am benefiting that with our new team in learning support. And we see that in every successful team any of us have ever been on, that the diversity just strengthens it. So what we want to do is just share some celebrations, share some things that have happened. So one of the shifts in education has been, not that long ago, our students who are deaf or hard of hearing were educated in segregated settings. And that is no longer an expectation. The expectation is that they are in their neighborhood school and in their neighborhood classroom, because accommodations can be made, supports can be put in place, assistive technology can support them. People's understanding and learning that because somebody has a hearing impairment does not mean that they have a cognitive impairment, and we have to learn and listen and learn from one another around that. So This is a little boy, and he's out with other students in our schools, just doing some activities. It's really important that our students see themselves represented in communities. So sometimes in our schools, they may be the only student who has a hearing impairment. And so that becomes, well, how am I part of something? So they have a culture that they also learn about, the deaf culture, and how to self-advocate. They see themselves in it, but they're learning amongst their classmates, and their classmates are learning from them. So we have a very strong program that acknowledges that. We have 3 teachers that support that work. So we have had some students who look to go to the provincial program, but very successfully they stay in Langley and are achieving at or above expectations for their level. And as you can see by the smiles on their faces, they love those outdoor activities that they have. I'll give you just a second to look at that quote. So playing together is really an example of inclusion. It's an example of purpose in a place and bringing meaning with others. It's spontaneous by children, right? It's not set up. This principal and some others often will be outside and see things, and they'll just send us pictures because they want to celebrate the journey that we're on and seeing that it is working. We are really creating a diverse community and celebrating that. An example recently in the high school is the Sweetheart Day, and many schools do ways to show the value for each student. This is one where every student had their name on the wall, and a staff member had put something on that, the back of that, for that student to know something unique about them that was valued by a staff member. And right now you'll see many on social media with Respect and Diversity Week with our kindness walls, our positivity walls. People are sharing those things, that people do belong, and recognizing the uniqueness and personalizing the strengths that everybody has that they bring.
So respect for learning differences. Like following you, Brian, now I can show your money at work. So this next slide is, last year when I presented, a group came from Walnut Grove and they shared with me the coffee cart. Well, this was a wonderful real-world experience for students to participate in. And, you know, the ultimate goal is to be independent in our communities and such rich skills that come with this. So what had happened, if you hadn't seen this presentation last year, is the staff and the students go to Starbucks and pick up the coffee and the supplies. And twice a week they go and sell their merchandise to the staff. And so it's been such an exciting opportunity for students. Other resource teachers and staff see the benefits of it in students. And so now they have it over at DW Coffee in Ari Mountain. And I know a group of resource teachers all got together for coffee one morning so they could go and tour each building and try to draw from every building different inclusive opportunities that they have for students, some rich and real meaningful tasks that students can be doing throughout the school day. This one here, so ELL students. So here they're sharing their learning, design, thinking, communication through games. So they have created games, and it's an equitable opportunity for all students to come in, learn about the games that they have created, and then they're having that opportunity to practice their language with students and build relationships. This one comes from Yorkson Creek Middle School. So this is another opportunity for all students. If you have a passion for swimming and you'd like to join in, there's an opportunity to go and play together and be at the pool situation or scenario, who has an identification and who doesn't. Everyone is welcome. And the key word here is that it's equitable, because it's accessible to all to be part of it. AVID students share an academic struggle and seek peer support. I love this one. So this is one I just actually, Lisa brought to my attention this week, where students share an academic struggle that they're having, and it's actually their peers that contribute and help them solve that problem. And the beautiful thing about that, we had Colleen in doing some training with our resource teachers and administrators recently, and she said that is one of the most powerful ways to build students' capacity is peer tutoring and peer mentoring. So what a unique opportunity for all students to explore a problem they're having and share with one another and learn from each other. Which takes me to social responsible contributing citizens. Coming from the north and then coming down here in the last couple of years, one thing I've noticed about Langley, being the principal of Douglas Park last year, is how much the community here gives back. And it didn't surprise me again. I was at RE Mountain doing some of the grad transitions, and I spoke to 5 students, and they were, all of them, every single student I spoke to, were volunteering in our community, and after 3 different charitable events. And I asked each and every one of them, is this something that the school, connected you with? Is this through maybe a course that you have taken? They said no. They said it's on their own volition and their own initiative. So parents, students, teachers, and all the different influences in this community are having a great impact on our students. And here are some other examples. At Brookswood, students take in donations for the Warm Hearts and Hands clothing drive. Walnut Grove Christmas fundraiser, this is a quote from a student. Some people don't have all the privileges I have, so I want to help as a student. Lunch buys at Walnut Grove Secondary. Apparently this is one of the most popular places to be. So this is in one of the classrooms where some of the children don't have some mobility issues, so students come to them. And it's not a forced opportunity, it's an open opportunity. So inclusion through curriculum.
So we're really seeing the opportunity to link the curriculum and the core and the curricular competencies as access points for all students to be part of their learning communities. So some of the things that we've been focusing on throughout the year are recently the resource teachers and also our administrators. As Carmen mentioned, we had a guest speaker come in, and she did 4 learning sessions with our resource teachers, but she's also come and done a special session with our administrators around what is the curriculum, providing examples of how the curriculum can be accessible for all students. She provided opportunities for us to better understand the purpose of assessment. Why would we assess a student? And the purpose of that would be to change our practice. So once we know a student's needs more, how do we respond to that? How do we meet that learner's needs? LSS staff at an open house, they shared with new parents and students, what is their role? What do they do? How do they support? They offered opportunities for them to demonstrate things that they do, and just create an openness of accessibility to themselves as the support network for learners. And again, we're looking at, we've talked about building the capacity for all learners as we go through this journey, and how do we include everybody? So we have our network meetings each month with our administrators, and they too are going through a learning journey around different aspects around that. And at the beginning of the year, we had successful school-based team training. We had 5 evenings. We had about 250 of the staff across the district come. The room was packed, and people came together to learn as a team around how to problem solve, how to have those discussions, how do we look at that inclusion journey and ensure that we're looking at each individual student, what are their needs, and how do we successfully include them. So our journey does continue. There is so much to celebrate. We can't possibly give you photos from every school or tell you every success story, but we are very proud of the things that are happening for our students. And again, we do continue. There's always opportunity as we learn more about our students and their needs to meet them. But one of the things that we do see is it's not something that we purchase and bring in and implement. It is really around a philosophy and a belief and our educational understanding of who kids are and how do we support them. And that's what we're continuing our work on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Wallace, you have comments, and I know you're struggling with your back. If you need to get up and walk around, you won't offend anybody.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm sure there's tons in schools that are happening as far as inclusion. I know Vanguard's here tonight, and I know that they do wonderful things as far as inclusion goes in their school. But I just wanted to mention one program that we had the pleasure of hearing, and that was a Warrior program at our ISL meeting, and what a successful program. So just wanted to make sure that would be a program that would be highlighted. I'm sure that you can't, there's so many programs that you could highlight. I hope that I would hear about the Warrior program sometime, but thank you for your continued work and inclusivity and perfect for Diversity Week. And there's a poster on the back here done by the Human Dignity Coalition that demonstrates a lot of inclusion. Look at it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Trustee Todd.
So thank you again. You never know kind of where the ripple effect happens when you drop a pebble into water. And I just want to really thank you for back to how you came and you spoke to us about inclusion. So thanks for being bold, for taking risks, for making mistakes, maybe learning from them, adjusting, and self-reflecting, and then continuing our journey. And I often say, but thanks for making a difference too every day. Thank you for your job.
Sure. Thank you.
Trustee McVeigh.
Thank you for the presentation. Really enjoyed hearing great work that's going on and seeing some of the examples of that. We've known as a school community and learning community for a long time the importance of belonging and what a difference it makes, and how it can be the thing that makes a student who's at risk or who's vulnerable, how that can be a deciding factor in their success in school or not, and just the whole concept of belonging is something we've talked about as an organization for a really long time. So it's really nice to see how far it's come along over the years from a concept and an idea and understanding to really being the way we do things, and that everybody is beginning to come on board with that and find ways in their own classrooms and in their own schools to make that happen for kids. And it's very empowering and it's very powerful, and I really appreciate the good work. It's great to see, and thank you as well.
I'd like to also add my thanks. The work you do is so important. Like, it's so important for our students to, understand and embrace and celebrate the diversity we have, but also for the district and our society. Because comments you made about, having a diverse team, it makes for a strong team, and that's, I think, one of the strengths of the country we live in is the diversity. And, that doesn't always go smoothly. It takes effort. It takes a conscious strategy to try to make sure that we see that. Also, your comments around self-advocacy. Regardless of who you are, people learning to advocate for themselves and overcome whatever the challenges they're facing. And especially important for young people and students who often don't have the confidence yet. This is something they need to learn to do. But boy, oh boy, you teach a young person the ability and the knowledge of how to advocate for themselves or their peers the right way, and you really put them in a wonderful position for the future. So just thank you very much for the work you do. It's so important.
Thank you.
So back to you, Mr. Stewart, regarding Vanguard.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Carl. At this point, I'm actually going to ask Principal Vanguard Secretary Patrick Thomas to step forward. We're going to do a little something before we go into the presentation. And Patrick was recently recognized for his incredible work with vulnerable youth, and we've been very fortunate to have him as a member of our educational committee for a number of years. And I know that our board chair tonight would like to also acknowledge you for that great achievement. So I'm going to turn over to our board chair.
Yeah, so on behalf of the board, well, first off, for those who don't know, on November 29th, 2017, Patrick was awarded the Medal for National Unsung Heroes in recognition of his valuable service to the nation. This award celebrates unsung heroes in what they do every day to better the lives of others. The acknowledgement described Patrick as an internationally reputed authority on educating and empowering the most vulnerable and disenfranchised youth. He shares his innovative educational strategies and models with teachers, graduate students, administrators, counselors, and physicians. Congratulations. I know you didn't really want a lot of attention to this award, but too bad. It's an important award. We hear so many good things, as a board, we hear so many good things about Vanguard and the good work you do up there and the very significant difference you and your team make to the young people that worked with you there. And we couldn't be more pleased with what we see and hear happening at that school. So congratulations and thank you. And back to you, Mr. Stewart.
Before you get underway, Patrick, you don't have to sit down. I'm going to actually have Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill come up and do introductions, but I do want to comment that I've had the great pleasure of working with Patrick for quite some time, and I remember the Apex James Anderson journey and bringing those two communities together. That wasn't an easy road, and but I know that Patrick's had a strong vision for what he wanted to see to serve our vulnerable youth, and I'm really proud of the great work that you've done there. I know you've got incredibly dedicated people there as staff. You have two of them in the audience tonight. Dee, who I've had the great pleasure of working with, and Kurt, both outstanding people around with the rest of the staff there that I'm sure you'll comment on. But anyways, this is a great opportunity to showcase some of the things you've got to share. But I know there's a context that Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill has been working on within this, so I'd like him to make a couple of comments.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. I do want to echo what's already been said about Patrick. I think one of the things I do want to mention is, one of my opportunities as Assistant Soup is to spend time at Vanguard and to sit and actually have philosophical conversations with Patrick. And we could go on for hours and hours just about vulnerable learners, what he's doing for students, his love for students, and certainly the award is well deserved. And I just want to say that. Congratulations, Patrick. Patrick and his team, it's only been four short years, or maybe long years, depending on your perspective, since the Apex and James Anderson have come together. They worked really hard to create a safe learning environment for students, and to really catch students where they are personally in their educational journey, certainly more importantly in their social emotional journey, I think, which is the most important piece of the work that team does. And really the important thing that we can take away from what they do at Vanguard is the successes that they have with those students, and be able to share those successes with our comprehensive schools, with all of our teachers and all of our staff. I'm honored to be the assistant responsible for Vanguard, and hearing the stories that certainly are amazing. Nothing short of miracles, but I think when I really get to hear and visit and speak with the staff, I know that it doesn't come from a whim. It really comes from hard work. Just to share a personal story, we visit our schools during our network meetings. During the last network meeting, when we were able to go to Vanguard, his leadership team and students welcomed all of our administrators to the building. I've never been so warmly welcomed by a group of students to a school, and I think that's a tribute to the staff of Vanguard. I'm pleased to introduce, of course, Patrick Thomas here as the principal, Kirk Renaud, who's the vice principal, and perhaps one of the more important members of the team, Dee Bassey, who's our intervention clinician and works with Project Resiliency.
Good evening, everyone. Trustee Ross, I love your question about sleep deprivation. I thought about our team, and we at Vanguard don't sleep a lot, but it's for two reasons. One is that we love what we do. Universally, every single staff member in our school love what we do, but also we worry about every kid that walks through our doors. And you know, we're talking about ripple effects. That image there in 2014 had a pretty significant one. It was the foundation of us re-examining what we're doing with alternate programming. Allowed for, Gordon and Susan and I were in Sue's office talking about what we could do with alternate programming, and it really led to where we are today, going down a vision and a story. The story was alluded to in amalgamation in 2014. Year 2 was uniting the Vanguard team, the students, the community, and at that moment I also welcomed a new part of my team and a new colleague, Kurt Renault, and he's going to continue on this one. Thank you.
2015, 2016 was my first year at Vanguard. They were still in a unifying state, bringing two populations of students together was a great undertaking. Apex had been traditionally for the acting out students, and James Anderson was for the internalizing anxiety type of students. So some people thought that you couldn't bring those two different types of students together under one roof. And I believe that we were successfully able to show that they can coexist under the same roof and work together for a common purpose. So over the last couple of years, we've been working on strengthening our foundations and our model, service delivery model in the school. And this year in particular, we're focusing on innovation and how we can improve things so that our service delivery model can continue to engage and to help the lives of all of our students. Just a quick picture here of some statistics. Since 2014, 2015, our total number of students have steadily increased. That is done through an intake process done through Project Resiliency. We have had new students being enrolled every year, and our identified students have been increasing very close to a similar ratio to our total number of student enrollment. Our Aboriginal statistics, those students have remained relatively unchanged, and we've been continuing to work with Mike Morgan in creating programs and ideas about service delivery model to meet the needs of those students as well. The light blue statistic there is an interesting one because it doesn't show at all until this year. And that is a statistic that basically talks about students re-engaging their feeder schools. Students that no longer need the level of support that they were receiving at Vanguard and were able to reunite or reintegrate into their feeder schools and continue with their education. So that's an important statistic for me to highlight because that shows a lot of progress where students are able to return back to their feeder schools or their family schools. Graduates, that's the last one, that continues to grow every year. Last year we had 25 graduates. And this may be highlighted later on in the presentation, but if you've ever been to a Vanguard grad, it's not about the GPAs or the A averages or anything like that. It's about the journey, the story, and the quality of life that our graduates are on the edge of beginning at graduation. And that's a very important part for us to highlight because those lives matter and they are important. On innovation. Yeah.
So one of the greatest, I think, innovations we made 10, 12 years ago, 11 years, we brought Dee Bassey and Cindy Pettit together to help us create an altered suspension program for the district. In that, it became pretty quick for me to realize that they were a great transition program for
you're making and what the consequences could be. That's our main goal. We work with the families. We do a lot of consulting in the district for, with the administrators, counselors, resource as well. Our goal is to keep the kids in their schools. That's our main goal. So if a school calls and says we have this student, they need support, we have used all our resources, we don't know where to go anymore. A lot of the challenges with these kids are that they haven't had an opportunity to tell their story. No one's asked them, what's it like living in a home where this is going on? Or what's it like to have lost somebody? Mm-hmm. And that gives them their opportunity, that gives them their life. So they can say, yeah, that's what life is like right now for me. And we advocate, we work for them, so they can go back to their school and possibly find a trusting adult that they can tell their story to. And once that vulnerability comes out, they're able to learn because they trust, right? So that's part of what we do. We do plan, when students come to our program, they also could come because they want to attend Vanguard, so we do intake as well. So we have a resource team, counselors, youth workers. They come in and work with the youth too to find out what their needs are, so it becomes a community involvement for support when they start school. One of the main goals we tell the kids is that we know you're coming here for a fresh start. Some of you may have been politely asked to come to our school, or some of you have been lost in the trenches and are finally realizing that you need to go to school, whatever it may be. Or maybe your friends have told you about this school and you want to come to this school. One of the main things that we say to the families when we do intake meetings is like, this may be a fresh start, but that means that you need to figure out what you're going to do differently to have this fresh start so you can be successful. So whether we're sitting on the carpet and having to cry with a student, or we have a student that's maybe possibly challenging, it may take a while to get through the process of project design, so that's our goal. So a lot of inclusion. We take any kids, and yeah, we love our job. That's what we do. If you have any questions about that, that's what we're about. The two of us that work there are both clinical counselors. We both have our master's level. Thank you to the school district who has just recently funded us to do trauma counseling. So now we are trained to do incident-related trauma within the district. Kids that come in with long-term trauma, we have new therapeutic techniques that we can do that with. So that helps us too, because it's hard for families to get funding to have therapy. So that's something that's new that's going to begin soon. So we're really excited about that. Thanks for your time.
Sure, you have more questions for the after that.
Just
it's talk about innovation. We're probably the only school in the world that does it at this point. So something pretty proud of.
The three wings of Vanguard's logo: safety, adaptation, and leadership. I'm going to take a minute and talk in particular about these three wings. Safety is paramount. And I often use the analogy with students that my number one job throughout the school is safety. But safety isn't just a physical sense of safety. It's emotional, it's social. And our students cannot develop socially or emotionally if they do not feel safe. We've got a very, very high number of LGBTQ students at our school, and that's because of our inclusive nature. And they have found a school, a place where they all feel safe. Those students, it's interesting because those students have taught us a lot. And through them teaching us a lot about their struggles, their journey, and their stories, they've given us the opportunity to gain knowledge which has helped us to help them become leaders in our building. And they're giving back to the school that has allowed them to be themselves. And to see them relax in their own skin amongst their own peers is quite a remarkable thing. So these three logos, the wings of the Vanguard logo, we incorporate into our morning meetings. We incorporate them into our staff meetings that we do on a monthly basis. They've become the three core things that we focus on as a school. Safety, focusing in on the trauma-sensitive environment. That can be as simple as a student slamming a locker door. We'll address that with that student because there's probably a few students on the other side of that wall that were triggered as a child growing up by a parent or a relative slamming cupboard doors. So we go there and we talk about why that's not okay. And we explain to them why that could be a traumatic thing for someone to hear on the other side. So those little intentional things go a long ways when we're trying to create a trauma-sensitive, safe environment for our students. Adaptation, executive functioning skill development is one of our school growth plan goals. And that's as simple as remembering to bring a pencil to class. Those are lifelong skills that I think all of us are working on and developing even well into our adulthood. But if we can give our students a head start on those skills, they will serve them well in the long run. And leadership, inclusive community and capacity building. When our students are giving back to their peers, giving back to their community, that is a true demonstration of them no longer being inadvertent takers, but they're givers now. And that's a great place for all of our students to be at.
When you're passionate, it's hard to be succinct. So we put me at the end because I'm going to expect these pretty quick for all of you. At the end of the day, really what it comes down to for us is the child. And the child, we've realized that where the rubber meets the road is what happens every day. We have a system in place that's not about individual circumstances, individual interventions, or individual people. It's about a system of things happening every single moment as a child goes through their day. Ultimately, what we know is this is a child that walks through a door. All kinds of things going on for them. And their systems are overstimulated, their nerve systems are going wacky. Ultimately, it's all about stress. The stress, eventually every child figures out a way to calm themselves down. A variety of approaches. They sometimes self-medicate, sometimes they do self-harming behavior, sometimes they disengage the system completely. So for us, what we focus on is understanding the science, but also the practical nature of every single day. Is that when things are happening, cortisol levels are skyrocketing or they're too low or too high, we know it affects behavior. It's a basic building block. Cortisol is behavior. And so for us, our team talks about the effects of cortisol imbalances in the body, how it translates into behaviors, and those behaviors allows us to have conversations. It's not about what the child is doing wrong. It's about how do we help them balance themselves out and become more stronger and allow their bodies to be more homeostatic. So ultimately, our pieces and all our puzzles really align with some pretty core concepts. Like how do you get every single student experiencing all these things and improving every day while still treating them individually. So ultimately, what we have done is realize that the safety and trust built behind the welcoming and understanding when mistakes happen, how to respond. We don't suspend kids. We don't. We don't need to because our interventions are all about restorative practices versus punitive practices. We put food in their stomachs first thing in the morning. We talk about health hygiene not only from a food standpoint but also a self-management, self-regulation standpoint. We have Leadership Wednesdays to build excitement, and excitement really powers lifelong learning. Happiness, ultimately, the dopamine that they receive through their artificial ways and through their creative ways, we try to create in part of their regular school day. What happens with that is that eventually allows them to start learning what calm and ultimately what rest means. For us, activities like Orange Shirt Day, Aboriginal culture belonging is all about where calm and community building begins. Rest is at the end of the day when they're tired, they go to sleep and they have a good night's sleep. But we have to work on that. We have to teach them how to do that. So ultimately, happiness is where we're going. And I'm going to throw a slide on that's quick. Cortisol and a bunch of neurotransmitters behind all that stuff. And of course the slide's stuck here. Where does that go? I'm going to press the little thing. For some reason it doesn't want to go. Let's see, this is somebody saying not to put this in, and I've done it. The reason that it died. So what we have is each one of those different pies, we put in place the primary neurotransmitters and hormones and and all the things that we know actually do the physical balancing behind the scenes. So that's where we're going, is we want to be more articulate about what each of those things do, understanding the science behind, the logic behind, the emotions behind the practices, so that we can reproduce this model. Year 5 is all about reproducing and allowing experts like Dee, Kurt, Cindy Pettit, the team that we have at Vanguard, go out and do more Pro-D, more education, sharing the knowledge that we've gained over the 5 years. And ultimately, the last slide that we have is really our model is so closely aligned to the district mission statement. It's really your courage and your creativity and your consultation processes 5 years ago is really what started it all. And we were fortunate enough to get the freedom to be able to do the work that we're doing, align with what you started, and continue to do that work today. So I appreciate you inviting us, and I appreciate the welcoming that you gave me at the beginning, an embarrassing moment that was, where my nervous system was going out of whack. As far as I could talk, but I talked faster because of it, so everybody benefited. So thank you.
Just to us.
Oh, I have quite a few, but I just applaud everything that I've heard tonight. I mean, I've been a huge fan of yours over the years, and the team, and I've been to one of your grads. I need to go to more. Could you just give me a little context? When you say trauma, I don't think that people here really understand that word. Maybe it's just me, because my life is very simple. Can you just define or put in context, what is some of the trauma that these kids are dealing with that they walk through your door?
I think we can all probably answer that in various ways, but ultimately, what we know and what we're learning is, intergenerational trauma, developmental trauma, anything that has impacted a child or an adult in a way that they have to change. Trauma happens to everybody every day, but for some reason, and we're learning as traumas are built upon one another, that's when sometimes they become unmanageable. So it's an everyday process. Trauma isn't necessarily a bad thing. When we work out too hard, we traumatize ourselves. Mm-hmm. But what we're talking about is those situations where trauma is built and there's been no efficient release of the stressors.
And a follow-up question, and this is a subsequent question, totally different. Your facility. What's the dream for the facility? What do you guys really want? I mean, we're making changes to facilities plan. You guys are all nowhere.
I think ultimately our facility is going to be an envisioning process like all the other processes we've done in our district, and I think collaboratively I would respectfully defer to the district leadership team. It's nothing as simple as a wish, but I think logically I feel very supported. We felt very supported by the school district. You as a group of representatives, I would have no wish that's been unfulfilled. Ultimately, I would hope that you would trust the DLT and knowing that they have our best interest.
Thank you. Trustee Wallace.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and I'm so grateful that you're at that school and in the district. I've had the pleasure of meeting both of you and working with some of your students. I hope to do that some more.
Recognize the picture?
Yeah, I recognize that art picture. And that was an amazing experience working with that student. What I liked about that, I love the project resiliency. What I see in our world when it comes to when we're looking at people facing challenges mentally, and I live in a suite, and I've said this before, and I look out my door and I see homeless individuals. And I look at the way that you guys are, you have this wraparound approach to looking after each individual student. And I think about, those people that are out there on the street, I'm thinking, if they got the care and support that you guys are giving your students, they might not be there. And about that whole, I have to tell you the trauma, I bet you, every one of us in this room has been through trauma in some way or another. We've been through loss. We've been through numerous things. Trauma affects everybody differently, as we know. I think it's amazing that you have trauma counselor, trauma? Three.
Well, we have 2 Project Resiliency staff members. We
Yeah.
used to have 3. Vanguard has 1 as well, and I'm kind of in back and forth.
Wow, we're so lucky because just being able to just have that intervention, right? And Patrick, I love the way you speak about, taking care of the whole self. And I just went to the Mind and Heart conference, and I know that Gordon Stewart was there and Mel was there as well. And they were talking about the science and taking care of ourselves. And you obviously figured it out because, nurturing the mind and the body leads to the heart, and that leads to taking care of yourself and taking care of others around you. And I just love so many symbolic messages of what your school presents, and the wings. You were talking about the wings, and I just vision these kids being taken care of and embraced, that they go off and they spread their wings. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Trustee Baker.
Thank you. It's always wonderful to see you, and as you know, I've never left one of your graduations not in tears. And I learned after the first year to wear waterproof mascara because I left and I kind of looked like Joker. It was all done. But that's really a testament to the impact you make on the students' lives. I mean, they're sharing those stories about their journey so openly as almost a past. It's like this has helped shape me to who I am today and has made me stronger. And that impact on a child's life, the entire team at your school is really not only amazing for that child, but for all of society. I mean, here, then you have this child that comes out, they have been in a leadership role, they're willing to put themselves out there and be leaders in the community. That's not just impacting that child in their school life. That impacts the whole community and everyone they touch. So I just can't possibly give you larger accolades for everything that you do. Your team, the whole, right from when the child walks through the door to walking out the door, the work you do is incredible. So thank you. And I wanted to also say, looking through the staff focus list in the report, how do you find the time to approach all of this? I mean, it just, what do you see as the thing that makes your team so successful?
Just look at me. I think a passion, first of all, for this type of work. Communication is a huge part of that. We've been able to create some mechanisms that allows us to communicate as a team, because there are a lot of things that happen every morning when we come into work. And if we don't have those opportunities to communicate and to talk about interventions and strategies, it would make our jobs a lot more difficult. So I would say communication and passion would be the 2 biggest attributes from our team.
And the staff is really supportive of each other. Like we're very aware of compassion fatigue, and most of us work really hard at trying to role model healthy living, and for everything. I mean, we have to. We wouldn't have been here for how many years, right? And so, and it's part of role modeling. The kids learn it too. So yeah, it's really important.
Well, thank you and congratulations. And I mean, this is become, it's always, these were always 2 amazing programs, and now this is just one incredible, real lighthouse school. So thanks for sharing the story.
Trustee Coburn.
Well, man, I love what you guys do. It's no secret how much I love your school. You do something really outstanding. You take the orchid kid, the kid that everyone sees as a stick and is getting ready to throw away, and you find the right environment, and that little orchid kid blossoms into a beautiful flower. And like Trustee Edmund says, contribute something so much more because they know something different about life that most people will never know. And because you nurture them, because they bloom, they go and they tell the world. And through that experience, our society becomes so much better, and we become so much better for the work that you do with these kids that so many people think are just like sticks, like the beautiful flowers. You've never been given the right environment. I do have questions in here. I have two. I have a million questions that I've asked you, but I'm going to narrow it down. And also, Mr. Thomas, what always tells me about your work is that it's a significant contribution to the nation. Like, to the nation. You are being recognized for not only what you do in the Langley School District, but for what you contribute to the country. That's a significant and I just always like to point that out. So, my question, and it's pretty very small, very easy to answer. In your opinions, what is the most pressing issues facing the youth that you serve? And what can the Board of Education do to support you and your team as you work to support some of the most vulnerable students in the country? And then my second question, because I think we have a tendency to categorize or make assumptions or stereotypes about the kind of work and the youth. And so what I ask is if you could tell us one thing about the youth that you serve that you don't think we know or that you think we ought to know. Could you let us know if you don't?
I love how you challenge us. Ultimately, for us, I think the labeling of behaviors is one of our fundamental biggest challenges. We've got people that are willing to and wanting to take every strange thing a child does and throw a label on it, and then that label, unfortunately, tends to create a pattern and creates an ideological reaction and systemically. And so for us, I think the thing that I've always loved about our board and in DOT is that we're talking about the child. We're not talking about the group of kids or a label. We're talking about each child's needs. And so as we're looking into the future, we can see the needs of elementary children becoming a bigger strain and bigger challenge because anxiety issues are increasing and the system is struggling with trying to cope. But ultimately, I think for us, it's about earlier identification and earlier intervention. We tend to get students when they're 16, 17 years old trying to start grade 10 and often really at a grade 8 level. So for us, systemically, I think as we kind of look at being more efficient and better at what we do, and neuroscience is in its preliminary stages, so we're learning more and more every day. I think continuing to adapt, continuing to have the freedom to be innovative as we have been in our district is really critical, and I think the brains in our district are well ahead of the game trying to resolve and solve those problems. So I think it's a future of adapting to the labeling and intervening earlier. If that makes sense.
For myself, continued support from the board is a start. An area of concern for me when I've sort of been at a loss on how to support a student, it's around mental health. Yeah. Because mental health concerns can become so severe that we are not an institution. And sometimes we are asked to do the work of an institution. When it becomes a concern for safety, and we have to ensure a safe environment by removing a student from our school, that is very difficult to do. Mm-hmm. And so working with our community partners, with the government, to ensure that the mental health supports are in place so that we can get those services for those students that didn't necessarily ask for anything to happen to them regarding their mental health stability. That's important to me because it's a very difficult road to travel when those students are struggling to the degree that they are struggling.
Yeah, I think like I was thinking what you guys are saying, but also I think being more proactive for kids that you see behaviors at an early age, like that's the part too, because sometimes we wait and we put off the behaviors and we tolerate and in the bigger schools it's learning and it's providing education, right? And the social emotional part doesn't always happen for some of those kids. They don't always attach to an adult, and that gets in the way of their learning for so many years. And then their way of coping and their way of dealing with their designations or their labels are drug use or mental health or self-harm. And then they come to us. So proactive is something that we're a big fan of. Yeah, and also working with the community. We're really fortunate to start doing that. It's nice to get phone calls from mental health to say, can we work as a team with this youth? It's like, that's what we want. That's how we can help those youth versus different systems. Working on a LAT team, our Langley LAT team, it's our pediatricians and substance misuse and mental health. They've been doing a lot of work too in the district around trying to change that, because one of our challenges is medication. And that's not always medication and no support, just medication. That's a big challenge. Some of the kids that come through with their list of medications they're taking just blows me away. And you say, are you seeing a counselor? No, just taking medication. And they're not.
Reactive systems.
Yeah. So that's one of my biggest, strongest passions is around changing that.
Your second question, I'm not sure we answered it.
Well, my second question is around these stereotypes that we have about basketball or the youth that attend there. And so if you could tell the public something, anything that you would want us to know about those youth. And then also while I have the chance, I also know there's a member of your team that is also Kristen McCain that's missing. I also like to acknowledge the work of the chancellor and the work that she does with the families and the intervention. And yeah, so surprises about what we don't know about the youth of your school.
That's a difficult question to answer succinctly, but one of the things I can tell you is we've had a documentary crew filming in our school for now their second year, and so the documentary will be out at the end of next year, which I think is going to really change people's perceptions of what alternate programs do, what the labels, how they've impacted young men and women, and that's everything. Like that's going to share light on that these young men and women are brilliant. When we have administrators in our district that are from alternate programs, so there are some pretty amazing stories out there, and I think the labeling that we've tended to do based on ignorance is changing. And part of I think our responsibility as educators and as people is to change that.
Mr. Todd.
Thank you. Two words that I just popped into my mind. It's brilliant and exemplary. And it just, you're following the model of best practices. And the story, watching the TED Talk, and it talked about one of the most empowering things you can do is just ask somebody to tell their story. And all by itself, it opens the window to healing. And right there, you had me. Okay? I like the fact that you're willing to talk about you need to recognize your own limits. That's an openness, that's an honesty, and where we need to navigate carefully with them. And you also alluded to being proactive. So I guess in a more perfect world, how do we be proactive in our elementary schools? Because that's when we start to label kids, and that's when we start to see misbehaviors, and that's when the kids get bored, and they start to experiment, and they start down to a path that may lead them to take a different course than what their parent who held them as a baby had never imagined.
I think the battle that you're talking about is being fought extremely hard by Lisa and Carmen and the team. The services that the inclusion work that they're doing is not easy work, and I don't think very many people can really appreciate how incredibly hard that battle they're facing is. There's a lot of reaction systems, and mostly it's because of ignorance and a little bit of fear. But I know that the work they're doing is really setting the ground floor to be pretty strong. And as we We started 20 years ago with Apex's inception of 24 kids. I remember where we were then and where we are today, and this district is doing an amazing job to further support and fight that battle. And I think we're doing an okay job winning it. I think we're pretty close as a district. A few things to work on and improve, but I think we're doing a pretty good job.
We have 150 to 200 students that my partner and I see every year, district, not just Vanguard. And that also is a connection to their siblings as well. So it's a start, you know, as for generations. A lot of times we see kids from that family, like it comes full circle for us a lot. So they're learning where to go to get the support and the resources.
Referral to Vanguard is important. Earlier, Patrick was talking about how it is difficult to receive a child who's at a grade 10 graduate level and is 17 or 18 years old, and we are asked to stabilize them, connect with them, show them importance in the world, academically achieve with them, and close their learning gaps, all within a 2-year period. That is very difficult to do. So if they're able to come at an earlier age, if they can be referred at an earlier age, you know, some of these students that are received aren't designated. And I'm not saying that that's important, but if a student's been struggling for that many years and is coming at the age of 17, we need to be able to support them sooner and get them closer to happiness and or graduation, whatever that may look like, depending on that student's story. So.
Mr. Cooper?
Yeah, so I was going to ask, do you think that there's a type of stigma where people are reluctant to send the kids to Vanguard in, say, grade 8 when it's first noticed that there's some significant trouble going on, and then they hold on, and then by the time you get your hands on the child, everything that was feared about them experiencing when they got there happened anyway, and now you have less time and more work to do the work that you could have done had that stigma been kind of eroded. So I guess the question in that is, what can we do as a board or district to try and erode that stigma so that we're not afraid to send our kids there soon enough before it actually gets to the point where you're expected to do what Kurt just said in a very short time frame, when had it been more proactive earlier on, perhaps they could have returned back to their neighborhood school if they wanted. They might not. grade 10 instead of one getting there. So I think it's a stigma piece. So as a board and as a district, what can we do to eradicate some of that stigma around your school that we all are crying over the great work you do, but at the same time, there's this reluctance to send our kids there. So there's a tension there.
Well, tonight is an opportunity in achieving that. Sharing what we're doing, and hopefully spreading some words of encouragement and clarity about what it is that we're doing, the students that we are serving and helping, and beginning to create some change through that. So.
I think ultimately our profile, as we've been a little self-conscious, I think as a school and as an alternate group of professionals, we didn't want to really be overtly sharing until we really felt confident we were on the right track. And so there was some conscious intention to be lower key as we have developed, and obviously with that documentary that's going to be coming out, it's ultimately sharing the truth. You know, we have not had one fight in our school this school year. I don't know how many schools I can say that. And that kind of messaging is being shared, and kids are talking to kids, and families talking to families, and communication happens in a whole bunch of crazy, weird ways, and ultimately, I think the truth is getting out there.
We have TOCs that want to be there every day.
Well, and they speak about that stigma, and they sort of put their hands up in the staff room and say, "This is an amazing place, and can I come back?" So it's interesting.
Trustee McLean.
Well, so much has already been said about what incredible work you're doing and what's going on there. And I do remember when it was just a tiny little school, and there was an incredible amount of really bad stigma around what Apex was and what it stood for, and to see what you presented and to see how it's grown over the years to the point where people are self-referring there, and that you're growing and you have such an incredible program, and to know that you're working now towards sharing that out with other schools and how it works, and how to make difference in every school, to me is just unbelievable, really. But knowing what I know about the staff and what goes on there, and when I first met you, Tom, many years ago, or Patrick, sorry, I remember thinking there was something special there. And when Project Resiliency first came into the district, I attended a workshop or a presentation with you on that, and other school districts there were like, wow, this is really cool. And I think it was at that moment that I thought that was really something unique and something that we should be really proud of and continue to nurture. And I'm really excited to know how far it's come and how powerful and impactful it's been. So there's really wonderful work going on. I think the things that have been talked about, the challenges, what we can do as a board to continue to support that, working around the stigma that's still somewhat attached, but is very clearly, I think, beginning to erode. When I read the staff report, I was really also quite taken with the fact that you're really reaching out to families and including families in this work, where before often that piece was not possible, and there wasn't the opportunity to do that. But seeing that that's happening to people really continue to go along. So thank you all for what you're doing, and really admire very much.
I think I get the final word. So thank you for coming. The one word to me is impressive. Like you're an impressive group of leaders. You have an impressive school, and you have a really, really impressive group of students. And so we look forward to watching you continue to do better and better and better. So thank you for coming and sharing with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so Trustee Wallace needs to leave us. She's having back problems. So thank you for making it this far, Rosemary. And so my trustees, we need a motion that the Board of Education receives a report on framework for enhanced student learning quality learning for information as presented. Moved by Trustee Dykeman, seconded by Trustee Todd. Any other comments on these? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that brings us to the district calendar for 2018 amendments. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you. I want to switch from two powerful presentations to talk about district calendar amendments, but we're going to do our best. The district calendar was approved on a 3-year process starting February 23rd, 2016. And but there have been 2 recent developments in terms of legislation that we need to acknowledge for what will impact next year's calendar. So we've got a couple of placeholders there that I'll refer to. One is in light of the redesigned curriculum, giving teachers some more time in terms of being able to work through that, and there's sort of be an additional day added there. And then there is the change to the family day in terms of dates, which will impact where our Pro D was. So looking at the calendar that's up here, this year we used the last Friday, the first week of October, that last Friday there was used for Curriculum Implementation Day. We're looking at doing something similar again for next year. It doesn't have to be placed there. We've got it out to our administrators. Whether that ends up being a half day for school improvement and the 21st is the Curriculum Implementation Day. What you have to do with the ministry is show that they're there. You have placeholders for them, and that's all we're looking at this point. For initial feedback, though, is that people, I think, are still leaning towards the half day on the 21st and the full day on the 5th. And the other adjustment would be is that we initially had our professional development day in February based on what was approved before. The family day was moved to the 22nd. That's where the Pro D was. So we'll be looking at moving that back to the 15th. So those would be the two adjustments. We do have to get our district calendar, those changes approved tonight, because you have to put that in by March the 31st. We don't have another meeting between now and that date. And also that what we will do next year, we'll be starting in the fall and moving into the spring, is look at the next 3-year process and we'll put that in place. So what we're looking for is that the Board of Education approves amendments to the district calendar for 2018-19 as presented.
So trustees, can we get a motion that the Board of Education approves the amendments to the district calendar for 2018-19 as presented? Moved by trustee Dyckman, seconded trustee Todd. Trustee Dyckman, you wanted to comment?
I just wanted to confirm, so the orange days, because I've had parents ask about this before, those are our curriculum implementation days, that kind of thing where it says other days in session? The 21st, and that would be the 5th, and the 19th, and the 22nd.
Yeah, those colors there in terms of October 19th would be a professional development day. February the 15th will now be a Pro D day. The 22nd family day, and I think the 19th is a placeholder for design and assessment, which we end up using for collaboration time. Again, they don't mind that; they just want to know that you've accounted for that time. And the 21st, the other half of that, they would also go towards collaboration. So you put the placeholders on, you're allowed to, once that's approved, we can adjust those within the school.
Thank you.
Okay. Trustee McVeigh.
Thank you. Are we allowed to put on, include in our calendar, summer session? As that is what we do, that's part of our culture and what we have in our district. So could we identify that as in a formal way on the school calendar?
Yeah, in terms of for the ministry, what they need in terms of the district calendar, that no, they're not looking for that. Now, that doesn't mean when we do our school calendars and we approve those at the end of May, we could say that, hey, we have summer session programs and here's where they run. And I don't think there's anything wrong with putting those on. But for this purpose, they just want to know, during the regular 10-month calendar year, how do you account for the time that we, in terms of minutes and in terms of days that need to be set aside?
Well, I'd like to see it go into the school calendars just because I think it highlights it and makes it legitimate as far as people knowing it's there and exists and perhaps a platform and go on it. Thank you.
Trustee Todd?
Superintendent Stewart, just had one question. I know we're into year 2 of kind of trying to balance the collaboration days in the calendar, and has there been any recent feedback? Like, I know we try to do some Mondays and attach them to Fridays that are out of session. What's the general consensus, or is there a general consensus?
The times that are there are actually only there because of contractual. Because in order to impact basically to impact the time set aside for teachers for prep, you can't hit the same 1 or 2 days throughout the year. So you'll find that those collaboration times are rotated Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with one other additional day put on there in terms of to minimize that impact. Having that feedback one way or the other, I believe that what we have heard is that certainly from the elementary world, the parents would prefer the early dismissal versus the late start. So we try both. We've landed there, and since we've landed there, I have that feedback.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, so the motion to approve the amended school calendar has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that brings us back to you, Mr. Stewart, regarding trustee indemnity process.
Well, so this is an information item just to make sure that the trustees are aware that we recently had an ad in the Langley Times in advance for a public committee being convened to review trustee indemnity. And this is to look at trustee compensation. And if there's going to be any changes made to that, those are actually put in effect for the next group of trustees to come in. But we do have the process is underway, so I want to make sure that I make note of that. And then what I will be doing is we will have 3 members from the community as part of that with Brian Isley and myself, and that we would be reporting back May the 29th in terms of the recommendations from that group.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Lakeman?
And for those that weren't involved in the district at the time when this policy went into place, it's actually regulation that goes with policy 1400, and it was decided by that last Board of Education that the current Board of Education wouldn't decide their compensation. There was always a lot of back and forth. It was a very conflicting position to be in. So Board of the past term decided that we would put forward a policy which became an amendment to policy 1400 that at the beginning of the last year of the Board of Education's term in office, the superintendent form a committee, and that there would be a public invitation process. People who weren't affiliated with the school district would come and advise and look at whether there should be a change, make recommendations to the board on the indemnity. So it only happens at the end of each term. So this would happen again 4 years from now. But we would be deciding the next boards, and that created a bit more of a fair and open and transparent process. And putting the board in this position where every year or a couple of years they were like, oh, do we give ourselves the right? It's not that anybody's retiring on get serving here, but it is as you can imagine a difficult position to be in. So this is seemed in our consultation with other districts to be the best option moving forward. So this is the first time. So hopefully we get some people who really want to serve on that committee.
Okay, so could we have a motion that the Board of Education receives the superintendent's information item report as presented? Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Ross. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? And I don't have any old business to bring forward, and I don't believe we have any new business to deal with. So that brings us to trustee comments. Trustee Dodd.
Last Friday, I got to attend Odyssey, and it was a great learning community that I totally enjoyed. Learned a lot about caring in action, and again, I'm always impressed by today's youth. So I think we're in good hands.
Trustee McVeigh. Trustee Lakeman.
So coming next month, it'll be attached in the agenda, but I attended provincial council and I wasn't able to get a report before this meeting. But the issues forum in the afternoon was on change to the funding formula, which has been an ongoing conversation. It was really fascinating, and I'm going to try to capture it in the report to look at the division and the challenges faced geographically throughout the province, and how much tension actually exists there. So, although we've always known that the differences in the north or more rural areas or more metro areas, that you'd have some variance. Like nobody's thinking that districts have exactly the same thing, that we're all facing the exact same challenges, and that's obviously the importance of trustees. But it's really becoming more and more pronounced as this funding formula conversation is taking place. And it wasn't something that I anticipated, but as you watch the motions coming forward for provincial council, they're very divisive. It's like, we would really like to revisit how we're going to fund X, Y, or Z in the rural north. So, and they're coming to BCSTA, and that's a fascinating thing, because then you're taking 60 districts from around the province and sort of saying, okay, well, we all want to talk about funding this thing, or we'd like to see something change in Metro. And it's just something that I think that my fellow trustees should be aware of, that they're, especially as we had to AGM, it's becoming interesting that conversation is actually creating more of a light on the tension that exists already. And secondly, I just wanted to say that I attended Fiddler on the Roof and took my kids. That was our family day weekend outing. And I'm always blown away by the incredible theater, musical theater programs in our district, and each year they up the ante. But their poster this year has some amazing shows. We saw a tidbit here at the beginning of the meeting of the one at LSS. But if you're looking, anybody's looking for a really affordable outing for the family, supporting our local community, and getting to see a great show, then really definitely convince you to go to one of these shows.
Trustee Ross?
Well, I'm excited about going home and watching this on television in my PJs.
Thank you for that image. Trustee Goodwin?
That's hard to follow. I've been doing some community events, a lot of community events going on right now. I'm looking for some more people to bowl, big brothers, big sisters who can join this team. But I think given tonight's comments, I just want to end with one of my very favorite quotes of all time, my quote. If you can learn a simple trick, Scout, you'll always get along better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it. And that was said, of course, by the lovely Etiquette Finch or Hartley. So that's what I'd like to say today.
So that brings us to question period. Question period is an opportunity for the public to ask questions of clarification. The rules around question period is questions need to be directed to me as chair and not to staff, although I may refer the questions. They need to be related directly to a topic on the agenda. They need to be succinct, focused, and not a statement. In other words, a question. May not be asked that relate to personnel or directed at an individual trustee. It may not be asked that are related to contract negotiations. So if you have any questions, now's the time. What's advice? There's a motion to adjourn. Trustee Beckman, second Trustee Coburn. All those in favor? Thank you.
We're running a meeting, brother. Good job.